Good morning, guys. So we are back for part two of this tracing an argument lesson. Um, I saw when I kind of like looked through and checked some of your work yesterday that a lot of you moved on and just did the evidence and stuff when you were doing part one, and that's totally fine. I just didn't include it, and I wanted to break it up into two parts because I didn't want you to have to sit through a really long recorded lesson. So, if you did the assignment and watched the video yesterday, you should have all of your yellow annotating done, highlighting for all of the parts of this article that are for keeping recess. And then the blue would be all of the reasons against having recess. Okay. Um, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to we don't need to reread the whole thing. We're just going to scan through and find the evidence that supports these two different sides, and we're going to highlight it green. Um, so the first piece of evidence that stands out to me here is where it says, according to the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, as many as 40% of school districts have reduced recess time or cut it entirely. I'm going to highlight that as evidence. I know it's evidence because it's telling me exactly where it came from. It sounds like it is a valid, legitimate group that put this information out. It's giving us a fact or a statistic that we could maybe use as evidence. So I am going to go ahead and highlight that. The question is, which side does this evidence match? Excuse me. In this case, it could kind of go with either. It just depends what part of it you are kind of looking at. So for right now, we're just looking for evidence. I'm not gonna get super into which side matches what at this moment. Right now, we're just gonna go through and look for the evidence. So if I continue to scroll down, we have this part here where we kind of get a little bit of background about recess, that it dates back to the 1800s and that it wasn't until the 1980s where recess began to disappear. So I am going to highlight that in green also. It's giving me days and dates and giving me an example that, back in the 1980s is when this first started to take place. I'm going to highlight that as evidence. The next piece that I noticed here, we kind of highlighted it as a claim already. It says, according to Dr. Robert Murray, pediatrician and co-author of The Crucial Role of Recess in School, giving your brain rest helps it work better. Moving from subject to subject without taking a break can overwhelm your brain and make it more difficult to retain new information. I'm going to highlight this because this is a good example. And that does go along with what this Dr. Robert Murray is saying. It's just kind of the explanation part there. Scrolling down, we have our examples of Finland and Japan that have multiple recesses a day. Going to highlight that. Then we've got our examples here where it talked about employees at Google, Yelp, and Facebook who all have sort of an adult version of recess where they're allowed to play Legos, go to the arcade, or what was the other one? Play on a karaoke machine during the workday. So this was supporting that claim that some form of brain break or recess can be helpful for adults also. As I continue to scroll down here, I see the American Association of Pediatrics recommends that kids spend at least 60 minutes per day being physically active. That is a good piece of evidence, as well as this part here where it says it's associated with lower rates of depression and obesity. There's some explanation in there. We have this piece here. That's not really anything. A few schools have eliminated recess to avoid sprained ankles or broken wrists that come with the intense schoolyard sports such as dodgeball. So I'm going to highlight this part, even though it's a little bit lengthy and kind of wordy. It's just kind of pointing out and explaining that sometimes this physical activity leads to injury, and a lot of schools, or a few schools, I should say, have gotten rid of recess because they just don't want to deal with, having these kids get hurt, sprained ankles, broken wrists. I mean, those things do happen. And then we have the example here about recess also requires an adult to monitor students. So then it goes on to say that not all schools can kind of afford that. So that is some explanation there. And then it ends off with 73% of school-age kids in America participate in schools or other athletic activities after school. And I'm going to highlight that as a green piece of evidence as well. So when you're going through and you're looking for what to highlight in green, after you've got claim one side, and then you've got claim two, the other side, you want to go back through your article and look for those examples. Look for that evidence. You guys did this last week with those short little passages where you were looking for a claim and a counterclaim, and the other stuff in between, we were highlighting that and pointing out which parts of it were evidence, which parts of it were explanation. You're doing the same thing here. It's just a little bit longer of an article. Okay, so if we scroll down to the second part of our little chart here, yesterday we filled out the 3 reasons for claim 1, and then we filled out 3 reasons for claim 2. Now we need to go back and we need to find evidence that kind of matches up. So our first reason was research shows that breaks can actually facilitate learning. So I'm going to go back up to where I highlighted that, and that's right here. And I need to find some evidence. So I think a good piece of evidence is this one here, where it says moving from subject to subject without taking a break can overwhelm your brain. So I'm going to copy that. And I am going to bring it down here. And I'm going to paste it there. I'm going to remove that highlighting. Because that is a good piece of evidence here, which supports, we have evidence 1, which supports reason 1. Then we've got reason 2. Recess can help adults too. So if I scroll back, I know what I'm looking for here is that big piece of evidence where it talked about Google, Yelp, and Facebook employees. And I'm just going to paste it down here. I'm going to remove the highlighting just so that everything looks the same here. And then we've got reason 3. Recess can help kids be healthy. So if I go back up, here's where I have that highlighted as a reason. And I am going to copy this part, that daily physical activity is associated with lower rates of depression and obesity. That is a good piece of evidence to support that third reason, that it helps kids to be more healthy. All right, so I've got 3 reasons, and I have 3 pieces of evidence which back up and support and help to explain those reasons. Now I'm going to hop over to the other side where it says recess shouldn't be put back on the schedule. And my first reason says physical activity can lead to injury. So if I go back up here, here's where I highlighted that. And then in the very next sentence, we have that example of how a few different schools have gotten rid of recess because they don't want to have to deal with those sprained ankles and broken wrists that happen from having recess. So that's evidence 1 there. Reason 2, recess requires an adult to monitor and keep everyone safe. I'm going to scroll back up. Here's that where I highlighted it. And then the explanation piece said some schools can't afford to pay someone to do this job. Paste that there. And then my last reason says most kids are already getting exercise outside of school, which is that last little piece here. And so I am going to copy and paste this piece of evidence about the 73%. So it says 73% of school-age kids in America participate in sports or other athletic activities after school. Okay, so we have analyzed both sides of this argument. We have listed our both claims. Recess should be put back on the schedule, recess should not. Then we have 3 reasons to back up each one. And then we have matching evidence to also back that up. So the last part of this, analyzing this argument, is something that you already know how to do. And that's where we're going to kind of look at it and we're going to decide which side had the stronger, more valid, better argument. And we're going to add this to the bottom here. So the way that you need to do this is just highlight these 2 boxes, and then you're going to right click on it and you're going to click on merge. That way we have just the one box to write in. So when I go back and I think about the way that this argument was presented, and I think about the different reasons on each side, and I think about the different examples and evidence on each side, it's my personal opinion that I think that the side that was arguing that recess should be put back on the schedule, I think that side had a stronger argument. And I think that that's because they had the quotes from the doctors and the about the brain, how the brain works. They also had some of the health benefits in there of how it helps to decrease depression and childhood obesity. So those are, obviously really important issues. And then lastly, it's backed up with those examples of how it benefits even adults. So I think that when we compare the 2, I would say that claim 1 is the stronger claim. So on this, when you're deciding, there really isn't on these a right or a wrong. It's whatever you think, and it's whatever you can explain and back up. So at the bottom here, I'm going to say the argument for putting recess back on the schedule is stronger because it presented 3 valid. If you don't know what valid means, valid just means like if something's valid, it's good, it's solid, you can trust it. So it presented 3 valid reasons and backed those reasons with, I don't want to say good evidence. What could I say? I'll say strong evidence. The author included examples of how the brain works, how healthy exercise is, and how it can benefit both adults and children. Okay, so this is what your answer for this would look like. Later on, once we get a little bit better at this, I may turn it into an ACE and ask you to, okay, now throw evidence in there. But for right now, I just want you to look at both sides, pick out the evidence that matches the different reasons. And I want you to be able to kind of compare them and figure out which side has the stronger argument. Which side does, do you agree with more because of the way it's presented? So again, don't forget on these, this is one author presenting both sides to you. So it isn't really like there's a right or a wrong. It's just which side did they do a better job of explaining which side of it is more convincing to you. Okay. Um, so this is all you need to do with this. So make sure that you've gone through and you've highlighted all your evidence in green and that you have finished off your little chart here and also included your little answer at the bottom here of which side was the stronger argument. And then that is your example of how to complete this assignment. So the next time that you'll see this, you'll have a different article and you will be working on it more independently. I think that this should be pretty easy with all the practice that we've done over the past few weeks. I think maybe the hardest part is just kind of being able to pick out those reasons and then also to pick out the evidence that supports the reasons. And again, that's just something that will get easier as you practice it. So if you have questions for me or anything that you're unsure of, you can send me a message on Remind, or you can use your school Gmail to send me an email and I can get right back to you. I hope that this helped you to understand everything. And if you have questions, let me know. Thanks, guys.